Welcome everyone, this is On Just Restart, and this time I want to talk about The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom and how I believe there's going to be a lot of dragons and other sky creatures all throughout the game, leaving a significant impact on both the story and the gameplay. What exactly is going on here? Well, let's talk about it today. Now before we jump into things, let's first very quickly talk about my social media. There's a few different things you may see on screen here. You can check that all out. It's linked in the description below. And of course, if you like what you're seeing here, you can subscribe, leave a like, or even join as a member. But now let's jump into things. So, why am I talking about dragons and other sky creatures today in this game? Because there's actually quite a bit of evidence for this. But before we get into the evidence, let's first talk about how there was already some of the lead up here from Breath of the Wild. So Breath of the Wild, yes, it's deemed as an open air game by Nintendo, and there's a fair bit of exploration that happens from a vertical standpoint when you go up to the mountains and you glide downwards. We even have gameplay with the divine dragons. You can find a way to get close to them and shoot them with your arrow or hit them in some way, and you get a scale or a piece of their horn. And then they fly up into the sky. And this is where things get really interesting. As amazing and as cool as the divine dragons already were, when you hit them and they fly up into the sky, they go through some sort of like portal in the clouds. And at the time when we first saw Breath of the Wild and we saw this event, it was exciting, but we just thought, okay, that's just a cool way for the dragons to leave the world temporarily and spawn again later on. But now with the coming of Skyward Sword HD, we've seen some elements there that are interesting, especially when we relate it to Tears of the Kingdom, what we know of that game so far. So with the divine dragons flying through this portal in the sky where they're going through clouds, it reminds you of perhaps the invisible barrier there was in Skyward Sword, because you could see the sky from the land of Hyrule, but you couldn't see it from above in Skyloft. There was an invisible cloud barrier there. And this is interesting because we are exploring a lot more of the skies in the sequel to Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. But what becomes even more interesting is that we're seeing actually quite a bit of evidence of dragons all throughout the world in Tears of the Kingdom. We are even seeing perhaps what appears to be one of the divine dragons or something similar to it behind one of the islands in the sky. Take a look. I'll try and put a bit of an outline there so you can kind of see what I'm getting at here, but it appears to be a similar kind of creature, if not literally one of the three from Breath of the Wild. So the implication here is that these dragons flew up into the sky and had the ability to go through this invisible cloud barrier, which explains why we couldn't see the Sky Islands beforehand in Tears of the Kingdom, which fits from a lore perspective when we take into consideration they did the same thing in Skyward Sword, and yet here in this realm with all these Sky Islands, we could be seeing a lot of sky creatures, including the divine dragons. Now, what makes things even more interesting though, is that we have seen patents for Tears of the Kingdom that show a number of different maneuvers and animations that Link will have in the sky that strongly suggest a lot more forms of aerial combat. We've seen different directions Link can shoot his bow and dive and fly around the sky. Perhaps there's even more. But why would they be doing this? Well, the reason being is because you need these mechanics to deal with other things in the sky. There's a big emphasis on sky exploration in Tears of the Kingdom, so they're going to need to fill up the sky. If the sky is a big part of this game and what we're exploring, well, it can't just be completely empty space. There needs to be things in there, including dragons. We already know about the divine dragons, and there seems to be evidence suggesting that they're going to be flying up into this greater, higher realm in Tears of the Kingdom. But it goes beyond that. From the E3 2021 trailer, we already started to get a little bit more evidence of there being dragons, because we actually see Link using a shield that appears to be a dragon head, almost something similar to what we've seen from the Zonai ruins, and it breathes fire, which makes it even more believable that it's something reminiscent of an actual dragon. And we've already talked about how there seems to be a lot of evidence of Zonai ruins all throughout Tears of the Kingdom, and what's interesting about that is there seems to be some sort of connection with the Zonai and the dragons. When we take a look at some of the ruins in Breath of the Wild, the Zonai ruins, there's a lot of dragon heads. Now there are other statues that aren't necessarily dragons, so let's keep that in mind as well to cover all our bases here, but some are. And regardless of whether this is Zonai or not, when we take a look at the literal logo for Tears of the Kingdom, it's depicting two dragons in a circular way, depending if you're looking at the doors in the gameplay footage or if you're looking at the actual logo, they're either kissing or going around each other in a Ouroboros-like shape, which, if they're snakes, which is similar to a dragon, suggests infinity or eternity. So there could be something going on with that. But the point here is that there's a lot of symbolism with dragons, with that weird dragon head statue with the literal logo in the game being of dragons, with what appears to be a divine dragon in the sky, and with the history of the divine dragons flying into the sky from Breath of the Wild, and also this emphasis on sky combat, there seems to be something going on here. They're gonna need things to interact with in the sky beyond just the sky islands. Maybe we will be interacting with the dragons. Now, will it be exactly the divine dragons? If they're in the game, I have to imagine they'll be treated a little bit differently. This is a sequel after all. It's been in development for a longer amount of time than the original game. So they're going to have to add new things. They're going to have to make this feel fresh. They're bound to, given the amount of time they've been working on it, you would think, right? So there's going to be new elements here. It's probably not just going to be doing the exact same thing as before. I imagine there will be actual combat. Maybe not with the divine dragons, but other beasts. So this then raises the question, will there be other dragons in the sky? Will some of these dragons not be so friendly? Will they be actual bosses that we have to fight? It wouldn't be the first time we fought a dragon in a Zelda game. It's actually happened quite a few times, in fact. Not all dragons in Zelda have been bad. Look at Valoo, for example. But under certain circumstances, he was a threat. Actually, not so different from Naydra, who also was dealing with some sort of parasite-like creature that was impacting it. So it may be the case that we do fight the divine dragons, but they may be being consumed by some sort of malice or poison again, but in a different way to mix things up. But there also could be other dragons. For example, there are dragons like Volvagia from Ocarina of Time that was in Death Mountain in the Fire Temple, and we see Death Mountain here in Tears of the Kingdom. There's a lot of malice coming out from it, so it's possible that there could be some sort of reincarnation of a dragon beast in Death Mountain, potentially. That's one of a number of possibilities. And on the note of bringing things back, we have seen dragon-like beasts brought back from the past in previous games, such as in Twilight Princess and Arbiter's Grounds. But with that in mind, what about the 3 Leviathans that we see throughout the world of Breath of the Wild? What if they're brought back by this great malice attack from Ganondorf? That's another option to consider here. Will they be able to fly? Will they be more like whales or more like dragons? That's hard to say, but it's another consideration to be had here. Those would still qualify as probably some sort of sky creature because, well, we've had multiple flying whales in different Zelda games. But another dragon that we've seen in the history of Zelda is actually Argarok. Now what's interesting about Argarok, this dragon is actually technically not a dragon but a wyvern because it only has 2 hind legs and then wings, but it seems to share some sort of connection to the Kargaroks. Why? Well, it's in the name, Rock. And what's interesting about the name Rock, be it R-O-C or R-O-K, is because it's actually the name of a mythical flying beast, a giant legendary bird of prey from Middle Eastern culture. And there's actually a number of different flying-like creatures in the Zelda series that seem to share some sort of inspiration from this legendary beast. One being the Argarok, but then there's also the Kargaroks. Now what's interesting about the Kargaroks, in Twilight Princess they're more depicted almost like dinosaur-like birds that aren't too different from a dragon. But then there's also the Kargaroks from the Wind Waker, which look more like just large birds. But these large birds seem to be almost like a smaller form of the Helmarok King, which also has rock in its name, which is a giant legendary bird boss that we fight in the Wind Waker. All of these are potential material to pull from for other creatures we could interact with and fight in Tears of the Kingdom. But what makes this even more interesting is that we actually have seen a shot showing an actual enemy in the sky, and we're not entirely sure what it is. Maybe it's a dragon, but another possibility is it could be the depiction of the Kargarok in Tears of the Kingdom. We take a look here at this footage or shot, depending on what I decided to put in there for the moment, but what you see there, that there's a bird or some sort of flying creature that has bat-like wings. Now what's fascinating here is if you pay attention, you'll see that this big sort of like cube-like stone that Link is riding on as it's kind of going back in time itself to go up into the sky, you'll see sort of like the transparencies of it as it's sort of being suggested to go forwards, or upwards I should say. You'll see that it's in front of this flying creature. And that tells us that this creature is behind this block, and also behind Link. Yet, if we take a look, it's clear this creature is bigger than Link. So this is a large enemy. If it's an enemy. Probably an enemy. I'm going to assume it's an enemy because most things like this you would assume would be an enemy, right? Regardless of what it is, there's a creature in the sky that is larger than Link that has bat-like wings that seems to resemble, if not a dragon, a Kargarok, which, depending on which game you look at in the Zelda history, looks kind of like some sort of dinosaur-like bird. So there's already evidence here of creatures like this. But let's go another step further here. There is definitely a big motif of flying creatures in Tears of the Kingdom. Take a look at this shot here where we see Link flying down on some sort of bird-like platform. That right there is symbolism for some sort of flying creature, correct? It wouldn't even entirely surprise me if at some point or another we see loft wings in this game. But what's also interesting is that when we take a look at the art for Tears of the Kingdom, we see a few things going on. We mentioned Death Mountain. A lot of you already know about Hyrule Castle. Yes, both those things have malice erupting from them, but there's this other thing that's going on in the map that's new, and it's this giant tornado. And what's really interesting about this giant tornado, beyond it just not being there in Breath of the Wild, is that it seems to be around the Heber region, which is where the Rito are, and the Rito are a bird people. What kind of impact or influence would these bird people, the Rito, have on everything else going on in this sky realm in Tears of the Kingdom? Could this tornado be a connection there? Could it be funneling them to the sky? Will they be trapped? There's a lot of possibilities that could be going on there, and it could even be related to some sort of task that we have to accomplish. Actually, probably is. It could perhaps be where we have to deal with some sort of new dungeon potentially, similar to how we may have to deal with some sort of new dungeon inside Death Mountain now with the malice erupting from it. These are possibilities here. It's hard to say exactly how this is all going to come together, but one thing that's clear to me is that there is a need to add more things in the sky for Link to interact with. We are seeing them going in that direction. From the patents, we know there's going to be more sky combat. We're already seeing some signs of different creatures that are already in the sky, like maybe the Divine Dragons and potentially this Kargarok here. What else could there be? Could there be overworld bosses like other dragons, or maybe the Helmarok King or an Argarok? Those are possibilities, and that'll be exciting to see this time in the sequel to Breath of the Wild, that being Tears of the Kingdom. But what do you guys think? What do you guys make of the possibilities of dragons and other sky creatures in this game? Could it go beyond just the gameplay? Could it impact the story as well, since there seems to be such a strong dragon influence within all these ruins and things within the logo and just the world we're exploring? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Anyways, everyone, this is On Just Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching. Take care.